Before we piece something together, it is time to cover a story that involves one that, well, could rival that of the Red Mist in terms of being a bad. Next we have Xiao, the former director of Lu Association Southern Branch Section 1. Last time we checked, she, Miris, Chun, and the rest of the fixers of Section 1 entered the library and fought the librarians. Most were killed and turned into books, and all that remained was Miris and Xiao, the latter developing a partial EGO. This was due to Miris dragging Xiao away. Now, before we catch up to these two, let's go over some info on them, some lore. Now, she didn't consider herself a soft person, nor did she consider herself tough or rugged. She was just straight and honest. Now, she might seem like she's unmoved by the death of others. She might be seen as cold and heartless, even though that's part of the job description for a fixer. Look out for yourself. Now, she thought about it a lot at first, asking questions. Well, she did value the lives of her colleagues, even if they didn't always last long, as she had to put victory first, as that was her role as a Liu fixer. This forced her to shed fewer tears, as to do otherwise she considered to be disrespectful. It felt heavy and burdensome at first, but she held on. She never questioned her method. It was the best she had at the time. Her problems couldn't be seen in, well, as solvable in any way. Other than that. Yeah, a typical fixer mentality. But that didn't explain Lowell, who had manners unusual for a fixer. And this was when he was newly appointed as the director of Section 2. He didn't bother to hide his grief, and often looked out for his subordinates. Yet he didn't lead his team to death. Well, not if he could help it. He was what Xiao wasn't, as far as personality was concerned. She saw herself as being unable to express sadness of the few to protect the many. Victory was all that mattered, yet he made her question this stance, asking what he had that she hadn't. She felt indignation because of this. She didn't intend to interact with him. She didn't believe in fateful meetings. Those were for the deluded and the insane, even though deep down, she wanted that. She didn't think that Lowell would care about him, as the difference between them seemed to be too great. But she wanted to learn more, to experience what he has, in the hopes that she could become a better person. That's how it started between them. At first glance, this might seem false, but she didn't define what love was, as she hadn't experienced it before, never mind understood it. Which was something seemingly useless in the city, as it might not end well if she did. Although in the end, she could be certain about her sentiment towards Lowell. That was real. It developed into love, something not much different from feeling attention, admiration, and a slight obsession, even if it felt burdensome at times. Lowell brought out the parts of her that weren't the hardened combatant, that maiden of iron. So when she lost him to the library, she missed him greatly, longing for him, regretting only that she didn't trust her feelings for him, that she was too afraid to tell him that he was her everything before he went into the library. She didn't want to distract herself with new things that wouldn't help her in the long run. The memory she had with him would still follow her. She planned to reunite with him soon, no longer having shame for the path she had chosen, and free from any guilt that she had. Now, this should prove interesting for what's to come. Then we have Miris, the one who dragged Xiao away, due to him remembering that as far as she was concerned, at least under normal circumstances, a mercenary's work was to deceive, to fool the enemy into believing that they were advancing when they were defending, to make the enemy believe that they would thrust from the front when they would strike from above, feigning submission when they were raising their claws. They must seem unable to attack when they're really quite capable of doing so that the enemy may grow arrogant. When the enemy is roused, they would need to be distracted through disturbance. While not making yourself prone to such anger, in order to defeat the enemy, they must be roused to anger. Although it was best to remember that one's emotions must remain a means to motivate the body, and not be the ends. Also, they needed to exploit the enemy's wrath with this in mind. She's clearly read Sun Tzu, considering that he said something similar to this. He said, if you wish to feign confusion in order to lure the enemy on, you must first have perfect discipline. If you wish to display timidity in order to entrap the enemy, you must have extreme courage. If you wish to parade your weakness in order to make the enemy feel overconfident, you must have exceeding strength. Yeah. Sounds similar, doesn't it? As for Miris, he noted that Xiao might be seized with anger and make unwise decisions, but, well, even the Maiden of Iron has her bad days. She usually sets herself back on track, although in this case, external help was necessary. When we next catch up with Xiao and Miris, she argued with him, not wanting to hear another word from him, telling him that if he feared death, he should just leave her and escape by himself. She wouldn't have brought him with her if he was such a bedwetter fearing for his life. She questioned why he dragged her away, warning of the consequences if his reasoning wasn't satisfactory. Miris saw her battle as nothing more than a messy scrape. If she tried to keep it up as she was, consumed by rage. Yeah, Miris was the only rational individual between them. He realized this. She hadn't. And Xiao wasn't going to stand for this, demanding that he moved out of the way, being violent towards Miris in order to get him to move, trying to assure him that she's as composed as she can be. Miris was unimpressed, as she couldn't even best him right now. His definition of composed certainly isn't acting like a rage-fueled berserker. That's not the Liu way. The Liu? Oh, however you pronounce that. Xiao didn't care. The librarians needed to be destroyed, seeing it as a better course of action. A firm grip on her blade, unshaken by fear. Miris argued that even if they warranted such a fight, she's losing herself, and for what? Pointless and juvenile vengeance? While anger is needed to face the enemy, too much will hurt herself. Fury shouldn't be the only motivation to bestir her, which is something that she should know better than most. Well, you don't get to the top of the Liu Association, well, certainly pretty high up, without knowing that or something similar. In fact, Miris was taught by her that he'd spill his own blood if he couldn't see where the edge of his sword was pointed. Xiao doesn't see why she should show resolve to those that took what was hers. They dare to offer something where they'd have to put their lives on the line to earn it back. So she asked Miris why she should treat them with any courtesy. Miris reminded her that Lowell would not react like this, pleading with Xiao to gather her senses. This caused her to gain some self-control back. Lowell and Section 2 weren't snatched away. They were made an offer. The best was taken, and they paid the price for losing it. Yet she couldn't accept that. She was questioning if this was truly of her own volition. Noticing the invisible strings that Roland and Angela noticed. Thinking of that made it harder to make a rational judgment. Miris asked if it was because Chun and Section 1 were dead. Well, the Southern Branch, anyway. Why she was acting like that. This was something that Xiao agreed with him with. At first, she only cared about her own safety, just wanting to get Laura's book, not caring about her surroundings, even if there was none to rely on once it was done with. But then she saw them all die. She started to waver, questioning the righteousness of her action as a human. To think of herself and none others. Many trusted her and followed her, and they were all dead. She asked if their death should be overlooked, along with if she should stop, if her selfishness was harming others. Should she save those that could be saved? Who should put up with this hardship? She demanded that Miris answer her, as she's unsure herself. Miris couldn't answer that, as she knows herself better than he does. He's no wiser than her, but none of the fixers that followed her were forced by anyone. They trusted her, and considering her record up to that point, where she was able to take on Philip, the crying children, along with the 8 o'clock circus without heavy casualties. I'm not surprised. This is even though it's not because she has authority, as she stepped down from her position as director of Section 1. They're not obligated to obey her, nor were they pressured by her to enter the library. In fact, she wanted to go in there alone, not wanting to risk their careers, which was why she stepped down in the first place. Xiao got what he was trying to say, that she should stick to what she believes in and move on, much as he believed in her. Who gives a about anything else? A cup of tea that retains its scent, a quarter of the day passing. And as she was saying this, Xiao heard something. Mirrors picked up on this. There was a warm and charming voice, otherworldly. Oh, yes. What Oswald called Miss Sun. Argalius heard her too, along with Philip, before he distorted, along with Pluto. Miris isn't hearing her. As for Xiao, she was arguing with that voice, where, although there might be truth to what she said, Xiao disagreed with her. This voice called her selfish and stated that she can only rely on herself. Xiao didn't think so, as some things can't be done alone. She needs someone else to keep alive if she can. The reason for why she keeps living. As long as that person is alive, she won't throw away her life, if she can help it. She should cherish herself and by extension those around her. As for the rest of what Miss Sun was saying, Xiao basically told her to shove what she was saying right up her... Oh, wait. Does she even have one of those anymore? Well, Xiao would not be tempted. It's what Xiao meant by... Well, at least Miss Sun said, from what Xiao has been saying, that a selfish mind shouldn't be viewed negatively. Well, not by itself, anyway. Then she drew her attention to Miris, apologizing to him for letting her emotions control her, to fail to lead him right, which will be the last time she does so. She might be in the dark, unable to see ahead, which sometimes leads her down the wrong path, but she trusts herself to return to the proper way, as it does exist. As they were watching this, Roland was asking if Xiao was manifesting EGO. Angela understood it as incomplete, much like Philip's was. Roland observed that she was talking to someone. Angela noted that only Xiao could hear it, similar to how wielding abnormalities worked. Well, that's what Roland said. Angela asked what he meant by that. Well, Roland could hear voices whenever he used the power of the abnormalities. Voices only heard by the wielder. This voice can range from rage-filled to a sorrowful wail. It shook him, as it can make him feel like something is boiling up or cooling down. Angela saw it as different to the kind of voice that Xiao was hearing. Roland wanted to know or rather how that is. Angela answered that the abnormalities' voices are one-sided. Xiao's voice was answering Xiao. Yeah. Roland wasn't so sure, but he knew that they needed to deal with Xiao before they could figure it out. Xiao, with this incomplete EGO, along with Miris, fought valiantly and didn't make it easy for the librarians sent to fight against them. But Miris fell, and Xiao was the only one that remained. Yeah, then she heard Miss Sun, the voice that corrupted those with the potential for EGO. Those that listened to her blindly became distortions. What would happen to Xiao? Well, after she was by herself, she was feeling inner conflicts. All of the southern branch of Section 1 of the Lu Association were dead. Only she remained. They all fought to the death. She saw herself as a dragon soaring in the air. Her heart heavy with regrets. She felt that loneliness. She was unable to see a step ahead. She didn't know if she should move forward, asking what Miris believed in his last moments. Did he hope that they'd emerge victorious? That she'd be a strong leader? Or that they'd get the books that they came for? The answer's, well, she wouldn't know. When she died and the breath of life rests for a moment inside her, then it's scattered to return to the source, she'd get the answers then. Then Miss Sun appeared again. And whatever she said, likely about giving in to the inevitable, Xiao noted that she was a persistent conversationalist. She refused to surrender to despair, the despair that she brought on herself. It was nothing that she couldn't overcome. She remained steadfast and persevered. She believed that strongly. As without despair, hope wasn't needed. Hope and fear were two sides of the same emotional coin. Without this, there was no life, and life needed a reason to live. So she will embrace life. She will fight for her own sake, but she won't disregard those that died, so that she would continue fighting. She would be disrespecting their sacrifice if she just gave up there. Xiao didn't agree with Miss Sun's words. Her words being that a lone tree cannot form a forest on its own. Wait, why does that remind me of what someone else had said? Yep. It's sounding more and more like it's her. This resulted in Xiao fully manifesting the power of EGO, which resembled ancient Chinese armor, one that is dragon-themed, with a fiery shawl and a guandao being her weapon. A guandao being a Chinese pole weapon. It's similar to the Japanese naginata, except the handle is shorter and the blade is bigger. Xiao said that even if she is alone, night would come. Night is followed by the dawn. Okay. Has she watched The Dark Knight? As that sounds similar to what Harvey Dent said. She then went on to say that a star that fades is insignificant compared to the rising sun. She warned her opponents that they should be prepared, for that day will be when a star of the city shall be gone. the Maiden of Iron resisted the voice and gained the power of Ichio, and quite a fiery one at that, giving her enough heat, rather being able to wield it enough to provide enough daiji bulgogi to feed a restaurant-sized building. Oh, not again! Why do I go back to District 23? Even outside of this context, it sounds bad, doesn't it? Okay, even with this power that would probably give Cully, the Red Mist, a run for her money, it was not enough. She was still defeated. After that reception, Angela noted that in the end, Xiao became a book. Roland observed that, unlike Philip, she did not back down. She did not break down. This was due to her unswerving determination. This amazed him. Well, she'd probably give the Red Mist a challenge. I wouldn't be surprised that if Hana Association was an organization that had their attention on her, she'd probably be a color fixer. Then he noticed that Angela was deep in thoughts, asking, what was it this time? She was thinking about the distinction between Ichio and distortions after watching Philip and Xiao. They had things in common, but there was clearly a contrast. Roland wanted to know more. Angela saw that there was something to restrain one from being a distortion. Both had highly unstable emotions. Both involved personal loss, grief, and an honest personal desire. Egoism being how it's put in one word. Roland defined it more as the mindset of only caring about your own interest. Rational self-interest, as in what Ayn Rand preached. Has Roland been reading some of her works? Anyway, Angela saw that both interpreted their own selfishness in different ways, even though their selfish desires could change the self, which resulted in an incomplete EGO. Both had a flawed mindset and still had distrust. Both lacked full conviction. But while Xiao had time to make up her mind, Philip didn't. Angela saw where they differed. She remembered the voices. Philip was broken by Oswald's words and Pluto's influence, along with Miss Sun, as Pluto told Philip to listen to what she said. A combination of these factors was what broke him. Xiao, on the other hand, had Mirris for support, so she had the strength to resist that voice, strengthening her will. Roland saw this as why she manifested Ichio and Philip distorted. It was why she resisted the voice's influence, and Philip didn't. Roland thought that it was about the precious things to her when she first arrived, that which motivated humans to live in a worthwhile way. It varied from individual to individual. He saw it as a tightrope to walk at all times. One false step and he could crash to the ground. Yeah, that's an apt metaphor for the difference between Ichio and distortion. And Angela agreed with him. Roland found it weird, as taking a chance with willpower and indeed making it, was not how the city worked. Angela saw this as a sign that the world was changing. Roland doesn't see it as simple as that. If there was something that could shift the current order of the city, its ecology, the head would not just sit back and do nothing. Certainly not if it risks threatening their rule. Angela sees it as affecting nothing, as far as them and the library is concerned, as they'd be received like any other guest. Angela, Callie lost an arm carving her way through 2 of the claws, and a number of abnormalities, and died taking down an arbiter. Do you really think that 5 librarians would stand a chance against them? It's suicidal to underestimate the head's forces. More will be revealed about Roland's past in the next lore video, along with some new, a new abnormality. Until next time, hail the rabbit!